Hi there. I have a supernatural mystery thriller, I suppose you'd call it. This one is Killer Insight by Karoline Anderson. And this is book one in the Kaitlyn Kruse series. This is a new series coming out. And I quite like this cover design. If you look inside the sort of iris or the eye of the illustration on the front, she's got like a kind of clock winding back. Which is indicative of the theme or idea of this book. So Detective Kaitlyn Kruse has a very unusual ability. She dreams about her past lives, and the memories help her solve her cases, often through the professional knowledge of her past selves. When investigating a crime on a Seattle hiking trail, Kruse and her partner Joe think they may have found the body of a missing woman, but the investigation turns up several bodies. A serial killer is on the loose in Seattle. Can Kruse stop the killer? I think this is a really interesting premise and a nice twist on the thriller crime genre. A detective with a special ability is always sort of fun, and also that ability, being able to access past lives, is interesting. Since the 4 past lives she can remember are as an archaeologist, a nurse, a surgeon, and a psychologist, the idea is that her subconscious accesses sort of relevant memories or experiences, and she can sort of use the knowledge base of those past lives through dreams. And of course, those professional knowledge bases are especially or even uniquely helpful to her current work life. It's lucky one of her past lives wasn't just like something low-key like a washerwoman. Unless it was, and maybe it's just not relevant to the story. Anyway, this is a debut novel and was written by a Vancouver native. By native, I mean person born here. Though the author now lives in Nebraska, and this book contains chapters at the end of the next book in the series, which is, it kind of reminds me of those scholastic book series, where it would be like the Saddle Club, and then it would have a little bit of the next book, and then you'd have to wait for it to come out. It used to drive me crazy. Anyway, I don't want to be too harsh with a debut novel. This one suffers from a few little issues. While it opens with us being dropped right into the action of finding the body of the missing girl on the trail, which I love when books do that, especially like thriller kind of books, I felt like from there the author wasn't 100% sure where to go plot-wise. We know there's a serial killer on the loose, but our lead takes on the case and sort of almost acts like it's a lesser crime, like a burglary, and is like casually questioning the few people who may have gone on a date with the deceased. That's her sort of lead, and that's kind of it. This takes up most of the first part of the book and feels very dry and repetitive. Probably could have been a few sentences or paragraphs rather than whole chapters, and everything's sort of described like, she went here, she did the thing, the whole process. The way that Kruse locks her door and her evening routine is repeatedly described each evening. So, more plot and less procedural, like life procedure, would have kind of strengthened this a little bit. Speaking of procedure, the author seems less than assured in the way her main character does her job. Mostly it's not too glaring, but at one point Kruse wonders if someone might be a criminal because they binge watch CSI, which is quite a mental leap. I'd hate to know what she'd think of me based on my viewing history. She'd probably just arrest me on the spot for watching too much Forensic Files. In another place, she explains to us what a criminal's MO is, for example, as if we don't already know this. Like, to me, this is very basic information that I think everybody knows. And then she also gets it wrong, confusing the modus operandi with victimology. So little details like this kind of undermine you a little bit because you're like, I know what that is. Why are you telling me this? And it's sort of like takes you out of the moment. The characters are a little flat, perhaps. Kruse's partner, Joe, seems like a classic trope of police fiction, which I don't mind. That's fine with me. But then he has this one wacky trait of wearing brightly colored shoelaces. And it's described as him changing them up a lot. And I kind of wondered how that works. Like, does he get up in the morning and change his shoelaces every day? Or does he just have like an inordinate amount of the same pairs of like shoes with just different laces put in them, and he just picks them in the morning? It just seems like an odd, like, I get that you're trying to go like, oh, he's just like this, but here's a personality trait that makes him wacky, or like that just shows that, I don't know. It feels a bit lazy, but sometimes that's a way to create character of like, they eat licorice all the time, or they, collect bottle caps. I don't know. And it's like their one thing. But this just feels really impractical. And I also wonder if having brightly colored shoelaces would maybe make people not take you seriously when you're questioning them or something. But that's fine. It's just a kind of an example that we're going to go with here. There's not a lot of banter and humor that you might expect between friends or workplace colleagues, which kind of feels like a missed trick. That kind of thing builds a sense of relationship between characters, and it also allows you to give exposition, sort of allowing the author to cut down on straight description that can kind of slow down a narrative. Sometimes you can kind of just have a couple of lines of banter between two characters and it shows they have good rapport with each other, they're friendly with each other, puts a little humor in the story, and you can get across quite a lot of exposition, sometimes in just a few sentences that way. And it's just sort of a missed trick here. Kruse doesn't have banter with anyone. No one has banter with anyone. Kruse actually has a best friend, and she just feels a little bit out of place. She's sort of a best friend character out of a chick lit book. And I wondered, Kruse has gone into law enforcement and has worked her way up to detective, which is presumably long hours and, would show a particular interest in, crime and investigation and that kind of thing. And then her best friend is just sort of this best friend character. And I just thought, what do they have in common? It would make sense maybe if her best friend had some kind of overlapping career sort of interest. Does that make sense? Like an interest in forensics, or, worked in a law enforcement adjacent field or something. But then I guess, people have friends that are outside of their sphere of interest, but I don't know. It just felt odd. I mean, I think all of these things are fairly common things that debut novels suffer from. And while overall there were times when that was just a little bit dull, there were things I really did like. And I think it's a fast read. Like, it's not a long book. And it's a nice, fast little read, which I think is really good sometimes for that sort of crime mystery genre. I think that a nice, fast read is quite fun. I think the way the past comes up in the dreams is really well paced and enigmatic enough in what you find out in those dreams that that works really well. There were moments that I find myself kind of smiling at Kruse, like when she has a little moment where there's cadaver dogs in the scene, and she just sort of stops for a minute and thinks like, cadaver dogs are pretty amazing. Like, their sense of smell is, it's pretty crazy. Like, they can smell, anyway, I won't go into all that, but it makes her stop and kind of wonder like how dogs must perceive the world so differently than us, with all of that sensory information that we don't have. And I really liked that. I thought that was, that's something that I've kind of thought myself. It was just a nice, interesting observation. It kind of makes the reader think a little bit like, yeah, that is pretty cool. It kind of made me like her as a character, and kind of like the author as well for having that kind of thought. So, I think in the face of a wide range of series in this thriller crime genre, with really seasoned hands at the helm of a lot of those writers are very assured. They have this kind of novel down to an art, or down to almost a formula sometimes. This book is bound to suffer a little bit from comparison to that kind of thing. But as an entertaining, lighter, quick read with a supernatural element, it's fine. It's maybe, I think for me, there are moments that were just a little bit dull because it got a little bit repetitive. And maybe a little bit, I'm not going to say outlandish, that's too strong, but like there are things that are just a bit over the top. But I think that actually works if you like thrillers with a little bit of unusual or supernatural elements. I think sometimes that over the topness doesn't matter, because you're not going for hyper realism, like you might in a straight detective novel, for example, or a police procedural type novel. So it's got a bit more drama. It's a new series in the field, and honestly, I think this one might find its audience pretty well. So yeah, it's got a serial killer, past lives, promise of more to follow. So if you're kind of looking for a new thriller series with that supernatural element, that's kind of that quick read type of thing, a little cult edge, this one could be for you. Keep an eye out for it if that is you. And if you like your more, often I review the sort of more police procedural crime type thing. It may not be for you. You could give it a try. But yeah, it's always nice to find a debut novel from someone new. So yeah, and a big thank you to PGC Books because they sent me the copy of this one for a review and to share with you guys. And thank you for watching. It's always nice to hang out with you and tell you what I thought of different books. Do you have a series like this that you love? And I'm kind of curious if you want to chat to me in the comments about what you think about past lives. The thing that I always think of when people talk about past lives is that nobody ever thinks that they were someone ordinary. Like nobody ever tells me like, oh, in a past life, they're always Cleopatra or, someone important. They were never a young woman who died in childbirth at 21 or a young man who stayed in the same town that he was born in and just worked peacefully on his father's farm and had 5 kids and then, died of something ordinary. It's always something dramatic. So, yeah, let me know what you think. Obviously, I'm talking about past lives in a sort of, Western idea of what that is, not in a more, what would you say, like a more comic idea of past lives. But yeah, chat to you in the comments and thank you for watching.